How's everyone? Yeah. Hey, Corey. Well, my goal for today is to cover Chapter 2, and then Tuesday we'll go over research proposals, the format, and all the sections. And then next Thursday we have that meeting in the library with Thurs Jan, and she's super good, so please don't be shy. It's in room 302, so we'll just plan on meeting there and come with questions. She knows far more about what we have in the library, and so we go through a little bit of introductory stuff here. We'll talk about sport discus today, which is my favorite index for finding things, but Thurs knows a whole lot more about it. So to begin with today, let's talk about topics. So between last class period and today, I've talked to several of you about things. What I'd like you to do today is, as I pass this around, you'll write your name, and then below that you'll write your research question, sometimes called the problem statement. And so if we could just go around, maybe briefly summarize what you're thinking about doing. Brianna, I know you had mentioned something after class last Tuesday,
Yeah,
I think.
Doing more research, and I think I might want to do something different, but I was going to come in and talk to you about it.
Oh, okay, so it's not ready yet.
It's not ready.
Not ready, okay. All right.
Like a dynamic warm-up and then like resistance, like sport-specific exercises in volleyball, and if that would like change like how high you can block, like make your block move.
Awesome. Okay, so your independent variable would have two different conditions. So would it be with or without?
What do you like?
So independent variable sounds like something with bands, which is great.
Yeah, like a sport-specific movement, so like making a block jump with the band resistance instead of like our regular dynamic warm-up.
Okay, cool. So your independent variable would have two conditions: no band versus with a band.
Mm-hmm.
And then your outcome or dependent variable would be velocity or accuracy.
I think I'd want to do it more with blocking, so I guess that'd be velocity, not accuracy, because that would be more difficult to assess.
Yeah, okay. So with velocity, you'd have to have some type of radar gun. We don't have one of those, but I know there's probably teams that do. Looking at you, Corey. You guys must have like several of those guns So a few years ago, had another student in this class that was looking at velocity, and so she borrowed a radar gun from Coach Wadhams. So just so you know, so he's very good about borrowing and lending equipment. So okay, so I just spoke with Jordan. Jordan, would you be willing just to review what we talked about?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do like doing a dynamic warm-up, just a normal warm-up for throwing, and then doing like a lift and then throwing again. And I throw the javelin, so that's what I'm doing on. So
She's
we'll
awesome.
Just do a normal warm-up, like our usual warm-up, then we'll throw, and I'll get like a baseline measurement. Then we'll go do like a heavy set of a thinking back squat, and then we'll go throw again to see if it has a change in how far we go.
Oh, very good. So typical potentiation type study. So pre-post type of condition. So traditional warm-up, and then your baseline throw. And this is going to be out at Lockwood High School, which is where you practice your throwing. Then they have a weight room close by the field. So baseline throw, and then go in, do some type of lift. So you said free weight back squat, heavy. And then wait a period of time, probably 5 to 8 minutes, and then do a post throw. So you're comparing pre and post conditions. So awesome. Okay. So Haley, any
I
thoughts?
think I want to do like the effects of pre-workout on trained people and then untrained.
Okay.
But I don't know if I want to do it on like power output or distance.
Okay.
Not
So
sure which one I want to do yet, but I'm thinking about it.
now that's a mix of ingredients, right? So look on the label.
I know. Something that people can
So
do.
caffeine, taurine, glucuronolactone, all those things. Taurine is converted to epinephrine or adrenaline, so we know that. So you probably want to, decide on which of those substances you're going to be consuming, with or without. So two conditions under the independent variable,
With it and then one without.
and then the effect on.
Like if they can run longer, if they have higher output.
Okay, I would go for power output. Running, just from past experience, practically, it's hard to get people to run to exhaustion. They're more likely, if you can do like a power output measure, it's over, and it easy to measure. We have jump mats and force plate and stuff you could get that with. So, very good.
I'm gonna do which sport elicits the best balance in college athletes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna use the balance machine in the lab. They'll have to do a couple like trial runs to get used to it, and then I'll probably get one or two athletes from however many sports we do.
Okay. Yeah. So you communicate with coaches, and then it'd be kind of a cross-sectional analysis across different athletic disciplines on balance. You want to make sure, as we discussed, several trials, because there's a pretty steep learning curve with that machine. How many have had done a balance test on that machine? Tipping all over all of it. Just don't ask me, because I would be terrible. But good topic.
I think I want to do like the acute effects of static stretching or static warm-up versus a dynamic warm-up or even a ballistic one on power, so like 40-yard dash, like sprint or like vertical.
Awesome.
Something like that.
Okay, yeah, so 40-yard dash vertical, we have definitely capability of measuring those things. And then so your independent variable would have two different stretch-related conditions, so a static versus a dynamic. So you'll be able to find a load of literature on that. So it's a really good topic. Corey?
I'm thinking maybe like how if whole body vibration like increases reaction time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to necessarily test that.
Yeah.
I know Tori has like those light up cones. I don't know what they're called, but they like change colors and you have to run to it and touch it.
That'd be
I don't
awesome.
know.
Yeah, so maybe like maybe with or without vibration, so two different conditions. And then your outcome would be something with time for a particular sequence on those cones.
Yeah, I gotta think about it more.
Okay, yeah, okay, so good. Yeah, awesome. So these are all topics that are within the realm of a great pilot study, not anything that's too extensive for the purpose of this class. So that's what we're after. We're just after kind of a springboard into your thesis. So Drew, what's...
I'm going to do the effect of full body vibration on clapping push-up performance.
See, I have never seen clapping push-up in the literature. I've seen med ball throws, but this is a great topic because...
And my unit variable would be like air time.
Yes. Yeah, so how many have done the jump mat test where you jump 4 times? And you get like this explosive leg power factor that is a ratio of your average air time to your average ground time. So if you look at that ratio, the higher your average jump and the shorter your average ground contact time, the higher your ratio is, right? So rather than jumping, he's having do clapping push-ups. So 4 clapping push-ups in a row using the jump mat and looking at the explosive power factor for clapping push-ups versus jumping, which, good. Okay, that'll work. So you'd probably want, in the literature, what you're going to find mostly is probably things like barbell throws and medicine ball tosses, which absolutely would tie into your topic. So, Carson spoke to you today.
Yeah, so I'm going to do flexibility on hurdle efficiency.
Okay.
See
Yes.
and compare if flexibility helps you get over a hurdle more efficiently.
Very good. So this is a descriptive correlational study looking at track and field athletes. So a measure of flexibility, probably we talked about a popular one, which is the sit and reach test, right? And then he's going to do some type of video analysis where you identify how long it takes from takeoff to touchdown to get over a hurdle, and then correlate that. So correlating flexibility with hurdle efficiency, I guess you could say. So very good. Yeah. Yes, Eric.
I think I'm gonna do, like the regular compression sleeves versus like the copper infused ones and see if like there's any added analgesic effect of the copper infused ones versus that.
I've been curious about that. How many have the copper infused ones? Okay, yeah. I've seen people with the knee sleeves, no elbow sleeves yet. Have you had any personal experience where you have?
I never use them personally, I just know like I've seen them sold in the pharmacy and some people swear by them and other people, you know, don't really see them,
Yeah.
so.
I'd be interested in reading the science behind that. So I really don't know anything about that, but seems to, some people you said seems to work really well. So your outcome would be range of motion or?
I was thinking like, kind of like a survey type of thing, like where they rank like their post-workout, like soreness or like joint pain or anything like that kind of thing maybe.
Okay, so you're talking maybe a couple of time points, 24, 48 hours after.
Yeah.
So most of the muscle soreness studies will go up to like 72 hours afterwards. Not saying you have to, but usually it manifests, 24, 48, even 72 hours, you may have some lingering type of effects. So would they be wearing this sleeve for a defined time period after?
I haven't looked in the research like yet to see like what like they recommend. I didn't know if it would be better to have them wear it like for a time period at post-workout or if it would be better to be used like during the workout and then like take it off afterwards. I'm not 100% certain like what their recommendation is for most effect.
Yeah. Are you controlling the workout? So you'd be giving them some type of protocol that would, as you know, certain protocols might induce greater soreness than others.
Right. I was kind of looking to maybe work with like the track team kind of thing, because I know a few of the track guys. And so I was gonna talk to like some of the coaches and see like what types of workouts that they do, kind of thing like that, as not to mess up their stuff because they're in season and stuff.
Yeah. Well, good. Sounds like you're on the right track. Tommy, you came by and mentioned something. You want to tell us all about it?
Mine, I was thinking of more like a medical professional practicality to it, and I know that especially in the medical field, heart disease is a very big issue. So I was thinking body composition and the correlation with resting heart rate.
Yes.
So I'll have someone take the in-body, and then I'll take the resting heart rate, and I can hopefully have a dot plot and look and see the correlation between them.
So resting heart rate, are you going to have them self-report that? Like wear some type of monitor where?
I'm going to monitor it so it's precise, so it's the same machine taking the same measurements.
Okay, so you'd have to have them come in and be kind of probably in a supine, relaxed state where it's going to get down to where you would feel that's a representative number for resting heart rate, and then take another, you do the in-body test and then run a correlation there. So, okay, good. And Jackie, you came by the other day, and what's your idea?
Well, I'm gonna have like a group of people from the Pilates class
Mm-hmm.
and test them on their like core strength and flexibility and balance, and then have people outside of Pilates come and test too. And then at the end of the semester, I'll have them retest so I can see if there's like any changes.
Very nice. So you probably want to get started on that soon to get your pre-data. So you're talking about, so you said I picked up flexibility as a dependent measure.
Balance and
Core strength. Okay, so that's a pretty vigorous study. So yeah, let's start getting organized right away so you can get at least your pre-test data, because that's going to happen pretty soon to where you can have them attending class consistently and then getting a post-test at some point. So very good. Awesome. That's a very good topic. Lainey, I think.
So I was thinking that, so like my question would be, does resistance, like band resistance, create more electrical activity in your skeletal muscles? So I'd use like a EMG compared to weights. So I would just do like bench, or you could do back, and that would just focus on your pec, your deltoid, and your tricep. And if you do like a band resistance bench.
Yes.
compared to,
So
like,
okay.
a lot of weight,
Bands on
and
the
there'd
side,
be
right?
more electrical physical activity with
Sure.
a band resistance or weight? Do you have more weight?
Okay, so just a traditional free weight versus a banded
Like, yeah.
accentuated resistance. Okay, we're actually going to include some of that in lecture today, and I was actually thinking about that in terms of muscle activity. So mean activity, you'd have to consider, okay, well, how much weight,
I would come up with that,
yeah,
I guess.
how many repetitions, warm up, and then your intervention set, and so on. So comparing two different conditions on one outcome measure, you'd probably just EMG is adding muscles is a lot of work. Any of you who've done EMG analysis, you're dealing with a lot of numbers. So I would do no more than probably 2 muscles. So that's, but you could do more. I'm just saying you're going to come back with just a huge spreadsheet for each muscle. So, okay, that sounds like a good topic. So what I'd like, I'm just going to pass this around, and you're going to write your research question or problem statement. So just put your name and then whatever your research question is in there. So you'd say, does the addition of bands have an effect on volleyball, your dependent variable there? So that'll be going around today. The other thing, right at the end of chapter 1, there's an assignment. So this is getting into that flywheel resistance training. We'll talk more about that today because everything evolves. So 2009 ACSM position stand was a lot about different modes of resistance training, but flywheel resistance training really wasn't around at that time. So that's just a relatively new development. Blood flow restriction wasn't really popular around that time. So I'm sure ACSM is probably thinking of a way they can redo their position stand, which is essentially just a big literature review. But for flywheel resistance training, the answer I want to know is how long does it take a skeletal muscle to grow significantly in response to training? So that's what this study answered, that question. So we have really sophisticated equipment, magnetic resonance imaging that can tell just minute changes in tissue growth that wouldn't necessarily be observable from the outside. So you can take a non-invasive measurement of what's going on at the actual level of the muscle cell and determine whether there's any change in tissue. So this will be due on Tuesday. So let me just pass this out. So the article is right here. So just getting to that question, early skeletal muscle hypertrophy. I think you'll be surprised how fast significant growth in muscle can take place. So I'm hoping that maybe Dr. Schaefer and I can request some flywheel machines, and we can start including that in our lab for labs and projects and things. I think one of those boxes would definitely be affordable with some of the funds we have available. Okay, so chapter 2, developing the question and using the literature. So objectives of this chapter, we're going to talk about the problem or question. So as the clipboard's going around, you're actually getting your question down on paper, which is great. Purpose of the literature review. So your proposal will have a small literature review. So you're going to learn a lot about your topic and synthesize it together in some way to justify the purpose of your study. So you'll really want to be picky in which studies you choose to include, because chances are you'll type in some search words and you're going to come back with a lot. So you really need to figure out how to narrow that down into just the studies that are going to be most helpful and related to your topic. We'll talk a little bit about search strategies. That'll be more for Tyree next Thursday, and the steps in the literature search. So getting started is the hardest part of almost any new venture. Research is no exception. So just jumping in and getting started. So this is an introduction to doing research. So 3 things you need. You have to be familiar with the area, learn what's been published, and figure out how you're going to conduct the investigation. So in the discussion we had, I think we came to some pretty good conclusions on what your independent variables or variable conditions within that are going to be, what your outcome variable is going to be, how you can accomplish that within the time frame of the semester. So a basic requirement for proposing a good research problem or question is in-depth knowledge about the area of interest. So you need to start studying early. So don't be afraid to get in and look at your topic and be really specific about the studies that are going to be most relevant to your topic. So from your textbook, all the way back in 1930, the first Health and Human Performance related journal was published. Research Quarterly, now called Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sport. That used to be the flagship journal for our field. Now it's kind of shifted to medicine and science. So Dr. C.H. McCloy was one of those early scholars. He listed some things to help you with finding a research topic. Is the problem in the realm of research? Does it interest you? Does it possess unity? Is it worthwhile? Is it feasible? Is it timely? Can you attack the problem without prejudice? So that's a good thing. Personally, if you're involved or really like a certain method of training, you have to kind of step back in the research and say, well, I have to examine this without bias. So this comes into play a lot with corporate type research. So I'll tell you a funny story. How many remember the shake weight? Are any of you old enough to remember the shake weight? Guess who did all our research? It was me. And I got paid a lot of money to do their studies. I did 3 studies. This was back when I was in Illinois. And it was really difficult to attack the problem without prejudice. So I spent a lot of time with lawyers on the phone after I would submit results that wanted to bend the results a certain way. So this is a very real issue, especially when, as soon as there's money involved, everything changes. So very difficult. The best thing to do is from the outset, you have to just say, this is, you get what you get, and that's it. So that's pretty much, after a while, I was just like, you know what, I said at the beginning, I was gonna give you what I got, and that's it. So are you prepped in the techniques to address the problem? So based on what you told me here, we're well equipped with all of our lab equipment to help you accomplish your study. Okay, so suggestions for finding a topic. So be aware of what else is going on at MSUB. So some of your other peers that are maybe in Dr. Schaefer's class or doing motor learning projects. This major is heavily involved with research projects, if you haven't figured that out by now. Almost every class you have a project or a paper where you're researching a topic of interest. So talk to people. Be aware of any unique or timely issues in your area of interest. So talk to professionals, professors, graduate students. Read literature and use the reference list to identify relevant studies. So reference lists are awesome because you can look at a literature review and there's so many choices in references, and then you can look over the reference list and say, okay, that one and that one and that one are ones that are most relevant to my topic. And then you can go to the library website and get PDF files of each of those studies. So reference lists are a great place to look. We'll go to the ACSM position stand in a moment to show you what I mean. Make a list of research questions that appear unanswered or are logical extensions of the material you've read. So sometimes in a literature review, there'll be a section right at the end, and it's usually titled something like Directions for Future Research, which gives you kind of an idea of where the gaps are in the literature. So things that you could pick up as studies to fill those gaps. So this huge literature review position stand, which is actually it's just a literature review from 2009, so 14 years ago, and it's pretty much summarized everything about resistance training. But there are certain things that have come out since that time, blood flow restriction training, and now flywheel resistance training that are becoming more common. Those are two modalities that weren't included in this literature review. So what I liked about this literature review is it's very well organized. So you want to take that same approach in the way you organize your own literature review. So the way that you want to do that is create an outline. So don't just start writing at random. You want to have major headings and subheadings, and then if you have your studies, you can actually say, okay, under this subheading, I'm going to put this study, under this subheading, this study, and so on. So an outline is kind of a shell of what your literature review is eventually going to be. So a couple of questions, just as we look at this literature review for practice, what are the foundational trainable muscular fitness characteristics? So what can we train with resistance training? What are we looking at? Trainable characteristics. Yes, muscular strength, maximal strength. Great. What else? Hypertrophy. Yeah, that's probably the most popular amongst the general public, wanting big muscles. Okay, so young guys, big muscles. Nothing wrong with that. Okay.
With like neuromuscular function, like that function of the neuromuscular connections.
Now you're going into the theory of how we accomplish hypertrophy and strength. Probably the most important one for sports, if you talk to a lot of professionals, is power. Okay, so strength, power, hypertrophy. What's the one that involves sustained contractions? Yeah, localized muscular endurance. So those are the four. And so this review pretty much looked at prescriptive principles for each of those four foundational muscular characteristics. So let me just see off the top of your head how many of those foundational characteristics you can list. Let's see if I can pull up the whiteboard here. There it is. Okay, so prescriptive principles. Grab my cheat sheet. Tell me what you know. So we take these prescriptive principles and we put them together into a program so we can accomplish these four trainable muscular characteristics: strength, power, hypertrophy, localized endurance. So tell me, what are these prescriptive principles?
Like weight training?
Yes, weight training. So what goes into a program? Tell me. Yes. Yes. Okay, now we're getting to it. Great. Okay, so in the ACSM position stand, they use the word loading. Intensity. Okay, what else?
So would set and rep number, that be under intensity or would that be different?
That'd be different, but you're right. Volume. Okay, what else? Yes. Rest for what? Yes. Okay, rest periods. They said that. So we're talking about rest periods between sets, rest periods between, they address both of these things. exercises, okay? What else with rest? Between sets, between exercises, what else?
Between sessions?
Yes! So they address that too. They address that separately. Frequency, okay? So check, 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 we're getting there. What else?
Periodization fall under like the regular rest periods, or does that fall under something?
That was in there, but we're not there yet. So we're taking these prescriptive variables and we're putting them together in a way that would be periodization. Yes?
What about like people having off-season and on-season workouts are different?
Okay, that's kind of like what Eric said. At the very end is they talk about programming, so they put everything together. How do you put these things together in different time periods of the year? Okay, I'll give you a couple more. Okay, does that make a difference? Yeah. The order that you do exercises, yeah, that comes into play. Let me see if you can get this one. If your goal is power, what's a particularly important characteristic of how you do repetitions if your goal is to get more power out of the program? Yes, A for the day, Eric. So they talked about velocity. So how fast you move the weight is important. So there's research on that. Another one that they address, exercise selection. So we still have one more. So eccentric, concentric, isometric. What do we call that, kinesiology students? Eccentric, concentric, isometric. These are different types of what? Not contractions. We don't call them, that's correct, technically, but we don't call it that anymore. So, muscle actions, so eccentric, concentric, isometric. So let me see if we got them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are all 8 prescriptive principles that they address in this review for each of those 4 foundational muscular characteristics. So let me just, if you haven't read this review, it's just, if you're an HHP student, it's a great one just to get general knowledge about things. Okay, so progression models and resistance training. So introduction. And then they go through some principles. So they define principles. So classical periodization, reverse periodization, undulating periodization. Okay, and then they begin this discussion about trainable characteristics. So these are things that we can see changes in over time. These are things that we can objectively measure over time. An increase in force output. Lots of different ways. Typically it's a 1 rep max, but there's lots of more scientific ways to show an increase in force expression. So muscular strength is the first one they addressed, and they took all of these 8 factors that we listed: muscle action, loading, volume. And what I really like is at the end of each of these prescriptive factors, they have an overall evidence statement. Isn't that nice? So you're not losing the reader. You can say, okay, so we've had this big, long discussion about volume. Now what's the take-home message? So that's what this is, this evidence statement and recommendation. What's the take-home message based on what we know and the science that is out there? So exercise selection. So this is where they go into a discussion about free weights and machines. It's great. Exercise order. Rest periods is in there. Cited a few of my studies in there. Those ones right there. and then velocity of muscle action, so repetition speed, right? Okay, frequency. Okay, so that's the end of strength, and then guess what they do? Then they go on to the next one. So strength, and then hypertrophy, and then a discussion of each of those 8 prescriptive factors in the context of this characteristic. So then it follows with muscle power, localized muscle endurance, exactly the same thing, discussing each of those factors. And then right at the very end, there's muscle endurance right there. So getting down, okay, so here we are. Relevance to sport applications. So isn't that great? Taking, okay, so these muscular characteristics that we have, how can they transfer? So where do we get this dynamic transfer to things that athletes do in sports? So motor performance, vertical jump. What is the research evidence on that? So evidence statement and recommendation. Sprint speed, evidence statement and recommendation. Agility, sport-specific activities, and then they go into progression models for special populations, so healthy older adults, and so on. So there's just a ton of information. This was like a landmark literature review, and it's probably time for it to be rewritten. They're probably working on that right now. But then you have this monster reference list. So you can say, okay, well, this is what I'm studying. I'm studying some aspect of power. You can look at the numbers, and then you can match those with the reference list there. So it was a real honor for me to actually be included here. So 3 of my studies that I did early in my career, right there, and right there. So about the whole rest period section was my stuff from early on. Okay, so that's an awesome review. I included that one for you. So what if after all that, the author of this textbook includes a lot of humor, which I like. So what if your topic is fished out? Before giving up on a topic, try to find a unique or unexplored aspect that you could begin studying. So back in 2009, when we looked at this, blood flow restriction really wasn't very popular. It was being practiced in Japan, but it really hadn't taken off in a practical setting. So one of my graduate students, who actually went on to get a PhD at Oklahoma State, he did his master's degree with me in Illinois, as well as one of my colleagues, Brad Schoenfield. We wrote the first literature review on blood flow restriction training. This one, it was written by 2012, but it took till 2013 to where we could get published. So it went through a lot of revisions. We worked really hard on it. But what we did is we took a lot of the information on traditional resistance training and we applied it to blood flow restriction training. So we talked about hemodynamics of blood flow restriction. So application of external pressure. How exactly does blood flow restriction training work? What do you know about it? How many have done it? Nobody's done blood flow restriction training. How many have heard of it? Okay, yeah, so you're applying a cuff that puts pressure around your limb. It's usually the proximal part right up here, or if it's the legs, it's right here, proximally on the legs or the arms. Okay, so what we're doing is we're applying just a little bit of pressure that partially blocks the venous outflow from the muscle. So you've studied blood flow in exercise physiology. So essentially you have what, the arterial side, right? You have the venous side, and what's in the middle? Capillaries. Capillaries that innervate muscle. So if you're putting compression around a muscle, just a little bit of compression, what happens is you're still allowing the arterial inflow. So you're still allowing blood to get into the muscle because the arteries are a little bit deeper. But what you're doing is applying a little bit of compression to those superficial veins that are just underneath the skin. So what you're doing is you're occluding the blood flow that is getting out of the muscle. One of the mistakes people make, and this can apply with a lot of aspects in people's lives, if they see something is good, then what? More must be better, right? Definitely not the case with blood flow restriction. Okay, so if you tighten that enough, what's going to happen? It's a tourniquet, right? Not a good idea, because then you're blocking everything that's getting into the muscle. So we want just a little bit of compression, and with a little bit of compression, we're blocking the outflow of blood from the muscle that's going back to the heart. So what you have is you're kind of accumulating metabolites in the muscle. So these metabolites, like inorganic phosphate and hydrogen ions and lactate, these are things that are not getting out of the muscle. So they're just kind of accumulating behind this. It's kind of like a dam where you've kind of blocked the return of those substances back to the heart. And so the accumulation of these substances tends to produce adaptations within muscle. So if you've read a little bit about blood flow restriction, what kind of resistance do you usually use with that? Intensity-wise, loading-wise, heavy, light. What have you heard? It's typically very light, because weight training itself and contraction of muscle can produce some occlusion on those capillaries. So it's typically light. Traditionally, it's about 30% of 1 rep max. Okay, and so you have studies that have compared, 30% of 1 RM with blood flow restriction versus traditional heavy resistance training with 70% of 1 rep max on strength and hypertrophy. And guess what the outcome is? Especially like in older adults or maybe untrained people, the outcome is pretty equivalent. So how many people do you know that because of joint issues, orthopedic issues, and so on, are unable to lift heavy weights anymore? How many of you know someone maybe middle age or old age where heavy weights is not possible? So the idea with blood flow restriction, especially from a rehab standpoint or for someone that does have those limitations, is we're lightening the resistance. So we're lightening the load and the stress on the joints, but we're still getting those strength gains and size gains. So that's important in our field, right? Because we want to promote preservation of muscle mass. Because as you get older, what happens is you start to lose those muscle cells and muscle size. So there's a connection between longevity and maintenance of your muscle mass. So this was kind of a nice study or a literature review to add on to that other literature review about all the prescription of resistance training, because prescription for blood flow restriction is different than traditional resistance training. Okay, so time for a little humor. Okay, so from the author. So you can just read this. Number 3 really applies to me. I think I just did this last night. So why do people constantly return to the refrigerator with the hope that something new to eat has materialized? My wife's just like, why do you do that? I don't know, because I'm hungry. Okay. So a single experiment seldom disproves a theory. Old theories are like old soldiers. So they gradually fade away when better theories come to take their place. Okay, so some things noted in your textbook. I love, this author is a really good writer. So listening to Mozart improves spatial reasoning. So when I read that in chapter 2, I had no idea what spatial reasoning was. So I looked it up. This is what it is. Being able to look at a shape Imagine what it would look like from another angle, or if it were cut in half. So, how many of you have great spatial reasoning? I don't know how you would measure that. People who attend church live longer. So that one was another one from the book. So what would be the connection there? So when we see claims like the above, we should ask ourselves why these things occur. What are the causes? So people who attend church live longer. Maybe they're networking, or maybe they live at a certain distance where they're not driving a car, they're walking. Okay, so that would enter into it. Or maybe they're talking with people at church about who the best trainers or doctors are. I'm just throwing out ideas here. So trying to explain these claims. That's what we try to do with research. Okay, so the means for identifying specific research problems comes from two methods of reasoning, inductive and deductive. So we referred to these on Tuesday. Inductive reasoning, working from the outside in. So in this case, research follows practice. So this is a lot of what happens in HHP. So somebody comes out with this flywheel resistance training, we're thinking, wow, that's really great. And then we do studies on it. Deductive reasoning is working from the inside out. So a lot of other fields, it works that way where practice follows research. Okay, so I tried to come up with a couple examples here. So Lainey, it's interesting that you brought this up because this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. So you're beginning with observations. And with these observations that we might see in the field, then we develop hypotheses. And then we conduct studies to form a theory. So how many of you have done this at some point? Yeah, okay. Is it different than just doing a regular free weight barbell? Yeah. Okay, what's different about it? Okay, well, yes. Okay. So you're stretching a band. Go ahead, Tommy.
At the top of the rep makes it much harder.
Yes.
Down at the bottom, it's easy. Up the top, it gets harder.
Yes. Okay. So one of the theories could be, well, there's a difference because with a traditional free weight lift, you're spending a lot of the lift decelerating. In other words, slowing down. There was an actual study on the barbell bench press where 80% of the lift is spent decelerating. So with the exception of that first movement off the chest, when you pop it off your chest and you begin that upward part, a lot of the movement is you're spent slowing down. Okay, so what you get with this is maybe a little more acceleration. So you're working the muscles over a greater portion, or maybe over a given range of movement, the muscles are doing more work, so to speak, or under higher levels of tension. So what Tommy said is the band stretches, you're stressing the muscles to a greater degree. Okay, so that's the lift part. What about the lower part that's different? Okay, so you've got bands on both sides, and you begin that descent. And that rubber band is stretched. What's going to happen to your velocity of descent? It's going to pull you down. What does that force your muscles to do? Contract really hard. So you have a certain reflex where if a muscle undergoes a rapid stretch, what happens to the contraction part? It gets stronger, right? What's that reflex called? The stretch, okay, that has to do with elasticity. That's the other side of it. The reflex is the myotatic stretch reflex. So the other side of what Eric mentioned, the stretch, shorten cycle, if we're stretching a muscle really fast, we're storing a lot of elastic energy that we can then use for greater force production on the way up. So what are some of your ideas for designing a study on this? There's lots of potential studies, lots of studies out there that have actually examined this. What are some of your ideas? Are there different bands? Yeah, okay, so you could look at different band tensions. The one thing that I've always thought about is how do you measure how much additional resistance you're adding to the bar. So when you buy these bands, I don't know if they come with some type of manual where they show you, okay, if you stretch it this far, you're getting this many pounds of extra resistance.
Looking at the amount of the difference of force production.
You could do this on a force plate. Okay, so our force plate is equipped with one test that's programmed into the plate where you can get peak force on a single squat repetition. So that would work. Maybe laning, that would be a good topic. Just doing a squat on a force plate banded versus no bands and looking at peak force output for a single squat repetition. That would fit. What other questions? So different band tensions.
Kind of what she was talking about. I'd be interested to see the amount of electrical activity difference.
Yeah.
Especially on the eccentric side.
Yeah. So a couple of different things you'd want to look for is both the average activity over the entire movement range, but also maybe the peak activity. And maybe you could sync it with video so you could tell, okay, at this time point within the range of motion was where you got the peak activity. And it might be different for unbanded versus a banded squat. So yeah, good topic. So yeah, we begin with observations, and so shooting your body down towards the ground and then making your muscles work really hard to catch and then propel your body back up. You're looking at different aspects of that theory that promote an acute increase in vertical jump height. So I've observed this phenomenon where with a banded squat, you wait 5 minutes and people tend to jump a lot higher than they would without. So you're kind of getting down and studying why that may occur. Okay, so here's another. How many of you have seen the line of ground-based equipment from Hammer Strength? They offer a bunch of different options for ground-based equipment. It's really great. It kind of expands on free weights, but kind of allows different angles in the range of motion, especially unilateral, like you see here. This is called a Hammer Jammer. How many of you have seen those? They're great, especially for football athletes. If you used one of those, just very sport-specific in how they do that. Okay, so the theory is developing muscular strength might be the most important training priority to improve overall athletic performance. Okay, so that's the theory. Okay, so how would you design a study to assess different aspects of that? What are some ideas that you have? Maybe you could look at different programs that place emphasis on different characteristics. So general strength versus other types of characteristics. Different programs that emphasize different parts. Okay, so there's a lot of studies that could go into this. Here's a recent review by some of the top professionals in the field that really strongly support that theory in terms of athletic performance. If you look here, based on the exact literature, it appears that there may be no substitute for greater muscular strength when it comes to improving an individual's performance across a wide range of both general and sport-specific skills, while simultaneously reducing their risk of injury when performing these skills. Therefore, sports scientists and practitioners should implement long-term training strategies to promote the greatest muscular strength within the required context of each sporting event. So, is that a strong quote? That's a really strong quote. If you haven't read this, this is a really good read. Some of the best strength training research has come from this guy right here, Michael Stone. He's been around the field for 50 years and he's seen everything. And this is an awesome review that he contributed to back in 2016. Okay. So evaluating your topic. Make a summary table to synthesize individual studies on your topic. So what's an example of a summary table? So your textbook provides a great example. So table 2.1 from the chapter, sample form for synthesizing studies. So this is a hypothetical example with actual studies here. These are some of the early studies on the cardiovascular training and body fat. So take a look here, the columns here: study, problem statement or question, participant description, instrument, procedure and design, and the finding. So maybe as you're collecting studies on your topic, it might help if you also make a study, a table like this. So you can kind of see where everything fits. So you don't have to dig around a literature review to find it. You can kind of, okay, it's in nice summary format where the results are readily available to compare. So do you notice any dose response trends? So exercise is a little bit like medicine. You can kind of make that comparison. Does everyone respond the same way to a given dose of exercise? No, they don't. Okay, so how would you prescribe a certain dose of exercise? What factors would you consider? Yeah, training status. That makes a difference. Lots of different health status factors. Consistency, their background, all these types of things. How many of you have ever taken the PAR-Q? Why do you take the PAR-Q? What does PAR-Q stand for? Remember? PAR-Q, physical activity, what is it? Readiness questionnaire. So it's a really simple 7 questions to assess your readiness for exercise. So that can go into the dose, the initial dose that you would prescribe. So you prescribe a dose of exercise with the intent of getting a certain response. So in this case, the response was change in body fat, right? So let's take a look. So the instrument was skin fold calipers, okay, not the best or most valid for assessing changes in body fat, but nevertheless, jogging 2, 4, or 6 days a week at 75% of 220 minus the age. Why use 220 minus age? Yeah, provides a convenient assessment of maximal heart rate. So there's a little bit of a standard deviation behind that, but for a lot of people it works really well. So if you're 20 years old, your estimated maximal heart rate would be 200 beats per minute. And so they did that for 12 weeks, and there was a 1% change in body fat percentage for the 2-day a week, 4% for 4 days a week, 5% for 6 days a week. So can you kind of see the dose response there? Is it linear? So in other words, if going from 2 to 4, so doubling the volume, you go from 1% to 4%. So that's not linear, right? Because if you're doubling the volume, if it was linear, you would expect going from 1% to 2%. Okay, how about this? 4% for 4 days a week, 5% for 6 days a week. So can you kind of see a point of diminishing returns there in the prescription? So if you have the time, what's the biggest barrier to exercise in our society? What do people say? You ask them, why don't you exercise? Time. Okay. All right, so 5% for 6 days a week. So if you have the time and you want to do 6 days a week and you want that extra 1%, then go ahead and do it. But if you want the greatest bang for your buck, so if you want the greatest benefit for your time investment, you're going to do this right here, 4 days for 4%. So you're getting almost all the benefits you get from 6 days, just a little less. So let's see some others here. Jogging in 3 days a week at 70% or 50% of maximal heart rate for 10 weeks. Looks like there was a 5% loss of body fat at the 70%, so that suggests intensity, right? So if you're able to do so, you have no cardiovascular limitations, crank up that intensity a little bit, that's going to get that body fat. 2% for the 50% condition. So looking at this table, you might come to this conclusion there, so you can read through that. So this is an example of what you might want to do with your topic to organize it before you begin writing. Okay, so steps in the literature search. Write the problem statement or research question. So, where's the clipboard? So everyone's written their problem statement or question. Awesome. Okay, so keep the literature search within reasonable limits, especially for a class like this. This is just getting a taste of research, so don't be overwhelmed. Consult secondary sources. Okay, secondary sources. Textbooks, encyclopedias, the fountain of all knowledge, wiki, right? Research reviews. Okay, so the reviewer often makes suggestions for additional research. Okay, determine descriptors. This is important. Boolean operators. How many of you have studied these? Okay, so the most common, right? And or. So and narrows the search, or broadens the search. So I would suggest using the word and, because or you're going to come up with way too much that you can ever read through and assess. Okay, search preliminary sources to find primary sources. Okay, this is where you may want to access Sport Discus. Okay, so I want everybody, we're going to do just a little bit of an activity here. We're going to go to the library website again, and Tyree will get more into this next week. We're going out to the library website. And so here, library homepage. Give you a moment to get there. We have a really awesome library. So I've been in a lot of different institutions, and our library here is top notch. So we're going to go, let's see what we get under, maybe get articles. Let's try that. Get articles. So again, once you're at this home page, you click on Get Articles, and then you can go to A to Z databases. So then you click on that. And so in alphabetical order here, so Sport Discus is probably the best one, or one of the best for HHP. So you click on S. Then you can scroll down, and one of the great things about Sport Discus is, yay, full text, right? That's what you want. You can get a whole PDF of the article. So you click on that. Now from here, if you say you're searching a reference list from a literature review, and you have a specific journal that you've identified where there's a study that you really want to include, you can actually check Sport Discus for different publications. So what I did there, just going up here to this publications tab, click on it, and then in alphabetical here, all of the publications available in Sport Discus are here alphabetized. So from your textbook, this is a pretty good list, but look at this, table 2.2. These are all health and human performance related journals. So what I like about this is they show you the impact factor. How many of you knew that journals in the field were actually rated? There's a rating system that goes in. So I think I said currently sports medicine is #1, and I don't think that's changed. Medicine and science and sports and exercise is right up there, #2 probably. So let's take a look. Some of the good journals here. So if you click on Journal of Applied Biomechanics is a really good one. You can know from the title, applied. So if you click on J, And then you can just scroll down, journal, looking at Journal of Applied, so there it is. So you can just click on it. And then you've got all the way from 2022 all the way back to 1990. So you can get PDFs of any of these articles from there. So take a look. So December 2022, let's see what was in there. So the influence of cell phone usage on dynamic stability of the body during walking. So I don't know if you've ever thought about examining that, walking across campus and looking at people as they're staring at their phone walking. So that, I don't know, that seems like a timely topic. So you can go back. Medicine and science. Let's see, we got that one, so under M. Medicina Sportiva. I don't know if that's a Brazilian journal or what. There it is, Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise. So same thing, they've already got 2023 stuff out, January and February already. Go here. So, wow, they do some pretty heavy topics. They're kind of drifting away from the applied aspect. The analgesic effect of resistant training after breast cancer, a randomized controlled trial. Let's see. The influence of therapeutic exercise after ankle sprain on incidence of subsequent knee, hip, and lumbar spine injury. That's interesting. So, do you have any questions? I would come prepared with a few questions next Thursday when we go see Tyree at the library, because she's going to go into a little more extensive here than what I can do. But she's a great resource. Okay. Let's go back here. Okay. So, impact factor. So, sports medicine, number 1. A standardized measure of how often articles from the journal have been cited over specific time periods. So, if a professor has a job that's more research oriented, then their evaluation would perhaps be based on which journals they've published in. So MSUB is a little bit different, where it's more of a teaching focus, which is great, but other schools you might be judged on which journals your stuff is making it into. Okay, so step 5, read and organize the literature. So make a summary table. So just to review those columns really helps a lot. You can have everything in front of you at one time. Okay, so deciphering scientific phrases. So one of the biggest drawbacks to reading research is use of a lot of long words. So, for example, it's long been known that, okay, so what did they actually mean? I haven't looked up the original reference, but, okay, so it is suggested that, I think, it is believed that, I think, typical results are shown, best results are shown. 3 of the samples were chosen for detailed study. Shame on them. The results on the others didn't make sense. So just know that reading between the lines here, what was meant in some cases, not all cases. Okay, so write the literature review. Make an outline from the summary tables. You got your summary table with all your studies, and then you're making your outline with your headings and subheadings, right? So it becomes very easy to write your literature review when you have everything in place to begin with. So basically, you got your intro, your main body, summary and conclusions, and then your references. So for your proposal, the literature review will be just one segment, one chunk. So we're talking just a few pages. So the most important parts, how are you going to organize that to provide justification for your study? So you want to avoid jargon in writing. Professional writing is very, very straightforward, very clean, free of jargon. So for example, a considerable amount of is jargon. Preferred usage, much. So just simplifying things, making yourself a better writer. Are of the same opinion. So agree. At the present time. Now, for the purpose of, for, it may be that, I think, large in size, just large, needless to say, and omit item, on the basis of, and just use the word by. So just very simple and straightforward in your writing style. Okay, more humor from the author. So top 10 problems that have not been resolved by humankind. We already shared some of these before. Okay, so do you have any questions? I hope you're excited about your topic.
The research proposal sample one,
Mhm.
literature reviews, like 3 paragraphs, that's okay? Or do you want?
We're going to have a little bit more than that. So if you go to the course outline, there's some specifications on your lit review in terms of pages. So, any questions? So yeah, so look in the course outline because that gives you kind of a specification on which pages for each section. So it's still quite a small lit review, but it's the most important stuff. Okay, so you have that homework assignment. So Tuesday we're here. We're going to review components of the research proposal, define those sections, and then next Thursday over at the library. Okay, thank you.